Hi, I'm Clea. Welcome to Casey Cafe. Today we're joined by Ken and Rebecca Carruthers. Rebecca is a student here at KCDLC. Ken is her dad. And we're going to be talking today about being a student with dyslexia, and also what I found out earlier, that how to fight for your rights as a dyslexic student and how parents can support their children by fighting for their rights. So we'll start off by talking to you, Rebecca. So how did you find out you were dyslexic?
Actually, I didn't find out I was dyslexic. It was my older sister, Jessica, who figured it out. I was having troubles with school, and I wasn't able to read or write by myself, or spelling or any of that. So she, we all figured something was definitely wrong, and she took the time to go research everything, and she came up with dyslexia. She found, we didn't know what that meant, but she found all this research and information, and she took it to my dad, and we reviewed it, and we found out that I'm most likely dyslexic. So then we came here, and I got diagnosed with dyslexia.
Okay. And just for the people who are out there, we filmed this once already, and I accidentally messed it up. So in case it seems like we've maybe rehearsed this before, it's just because we are having this conversation for a second time. So my apologies. It was little technical issues. So how did dyslexia affect you in school? How does it affect you in your everyday life?
Well, I think it affected me in both ways, that it made me have to try harder than most people, and it took me twice as long to, take a quiz, or I work at multiple places, like do basic stuff on the till at work or something.
Mm-hmm. Then
one of my colleagues or coworkers, they do it within 2 seconds. Logging into their account takes me, a minute or two, because I have to sit there and, remember all my passwords and make sure I'm doing it right and I don't lock myself out.
Yes.
Yeah.
I hate when that happens. I know when we're doing the passwords here, and I'm like, okay, 253, and like going over and over, and like, don't put it in 3 times wrong.
And then you're locked out, and then you gotta reset it, and yeah.
I love it.
So it kind of affected me in that way, that I was kind of slower than everybody else. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of your school, how did that look, being in school and not knowing that you were dyslexic, not knowing that you had a problem?
Well, since I didn't know, I knew that I couldn't read, but I just thought, I can't read, and I thought that was kind of normal, because, there were some kids who also struggled, but they eventually started to get it, and I wasn't getting it, so I knew there's definitely something more wrong, but I didn't know what it was. Mm-hmm. And as the other kids started to get it and I didn't, people would notice it, and, and make fun of me for it, and, also, I was down on myself because I was trying so hard, but I couldn't understand what the other kids were, so I felt, kind of an outcast, yeah. And it made me feel stupid, for a period of time in my life. I felt like I was not smart, that I was dumb, and
it's something we're always trying to remind people that come here that we know you are giving 110% all the time. Yeah. I find it can get really hard for non-dyslexic people to realize that you are constantly on, you're constantly giving it all your energy, even if you're sitting there and you look like you're just oh God,
It's because you're exhausted
Yeah.
from giving all your
Yeah,
energy.
exactly.
And then people are think, oh, she's just lazy. No, I'm exhausted because my brain is just going like...
Yeah, and you're just like, I have to think about everything. No, I like that. I like that so much. What advice, being a person who was older when they were diagnosed, what advice would you give to people, you know, who are, say, in their late teens, in their early 20s, and are struggling with reading and spelling, or think they might be dyslexic, or have just been diagnosed as being dyslexic?
Well, I definitely, when I found out that old, I felt it was kind of scary, and it was, it also was like I didn't want to deal with it. I was like, I'm an adult. I don't want to go to school, and do all this. I graduated high school at first, but, you know, you can't be afraid to, you know, admit that something's wrong and that you need help, and that you also need to realize that, you know, that you can't be afraid to, like, continue to do school or anything if you need that help. Like, if I wouldn't have came here, then I don't think I wouldn't have the opportunities I have with the jobs that I have right now, and all the, like, opportunities I've received with being a makeup artist and everything. I don't think I would have been able to do most of the things or take my schooling for that if I wouldn't have been coming here and getting help.
Like, another thing I find, like, did you find, how to phrase this question? Like, I find a lot of the older students, when they come and they have to do, like, book 1 and 2 and 3, like, when did you realize that, yes, this is working, even though it seems really weird, even though a lot of people are like, this is so babyish?
It's definitely, I feel like when you first start coming here, there's a lot of younger kids, and the first lessons are very, catered to their ages, and very, you're reading, like, the cat and dog were best friends and went on a stroll in the park, and you're like, I feel like a baby reading a child's book, but it's really like, you need to learn that you need to go backwards, I think. You can't go forward because you don't know how to read, so you need to start over. And even that's why it was scary, because I was so old, and I'm like, well, now I have to start reading baby books and work my way up. That's kind of, it was embarrassing in a way, you feel embarrassed, but you have to realize you can't be embarrassed by that. You have to realize that, you're doing what you need to do to learn how to read and write properly. You shouldn't be embarrassed by that. You should be, when I, told my friends everything I was doing here, I thought, it was hard and I felt embarrassed, but they were proud of me that I was, that I was able to, do all of this and come back and redo all of that. It wasn't embarrassing, that's one of the things, you can't be embarrassed.
I guess it's not helpful, right? Like, you can be embarrassed and do nothing and just keep struggling your whole life, or you can be like, I just got to do this. And
that's kind of the attitude I got, was like, I need to do this. I need to know how to. It's more embarrassing not trying and not doing your best and not knowing how to read and write, because you were scared to, get the help and do all this stuff that, you think is for kids, but really, I don't think it's this place is for all ages, Yes. It may start off slow and you may feel like this is easy, but it gets harder, trust me, it does. And you do learn a lot. Yeah. And as for like what level, I think I started the levels, because there's different levels, what level I started, I think, getting better at reading. I would say maybe like level 4 or 5.
Yeah, when we started doing multi-syllable words.
Yeah, it started to, kind of click and being easier.
Yeah. And I get it so often, like, like book 4, when you first, you're like, oh my gosh, because you've never read that way before. And then after book 4, people are always like, Oh, okay, because you finally have all the
The
skills
rules
you need to
and
decode
then,
and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, like you don't have your syllabus yet, but you at least have the ability to, okay, now I can decode this enough that I can learn this other stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. So then, Ken, as a parent, how did it feel for you to see Rebecca struggling with being undiagnosed and after diagnosis?
Well, her first indication that I got from the school and everything, she was, I think, entering grade 1 or grade 2.
Mm-hmm.
That was in 2005, where the school psychologist said she's she's struggling with the reading and writing, and they attributed it to it a year and a half earlier. We had a house fire where Rebecca tragically lost her mom in it, and they tried, well, not tried to, they had said that that probably has a lot to do with why she's not concentrating, not getting to the same level as the other kids, which to me made sense. I mean, I had thought she was handling the loss of her mother and the house fire well. We had moved back in, and she seemed to, so they piled more homework on her, sent her home with more sheets, and her and I spent every evening after supper at the dining room table going over and teaching her, and she just didn't seem to be getting it. They said she probably needs some tutoring, so they suggested or mentioned Sylvan's, and I sent her there, and after a year and a half of that, like a whole summer, and after class, school every 2 or 3 days a week, I realized that wasn't doing anything. She hadn't improved at all.
Yeah.
And that was when my other daughter, her older sister Jessica, had come up and said, I think she's got dyslexia, and then she showed me on the computer and printed it off, and I read it, and I had her find out, well, where can we get some more information, where can we find out about dyslexia, where can we get her properly tested and diagnosed, and everything came back to KC being the only facility that really did that in Winnipeg and I believe in Manitoba.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that kind of started everything going for us forward for her.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was 2 steps forward or 1 step forward, 2 back up till that point. So I had brought her here, contacted Cheryl, brought her here, and over a couple of months bringing her here, they did a proper diagnosis and quite comprehensive report, which I then took the day after I met with Cheryl here and got the report and went over it and realized the level of her dyslexia and where she was at grade wise and everything. I then took that to the school.
So you're on you're like more the severe dyslexia.
Yeah, she's at the severe end for sure.
Uh-huh.
So I took that to the school and met with the principal. I was actually sat there the very next day and waited for him to get there. I was there ahead of him, and we went over that, and he assured me that the school would review that report and bring it up with the teachers and the thing, and they'd get back to me as soon as possible. I'd say it took a week and a half to 2 weeks. We had that meeting, and they were going to implement a lot of the strategies in there, and because I had said this is exactly what she needs, and was assured that would happen, but unfortunately that didn't happen. And
I'm just going to interrupt you for a minute just to let people know who are watching who maybe aren't terribly familiar with dyslexia. The only intervention that works for people with dyslexia is Orton-Gillingham-based multisensory techniques. So a lot of times when people are slower readers, they might do programs at school that are meant for neurotypical learners to kind of increase their spelling, but for dyslexic people it has to be Orton-Gillingham based. It's the only way that we learn how to decode and how to gain phonemic awareness is with those programs. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, well, you're correct in that system is working for her, the Barton system. Mm-hmm. The school had started to change, like they weren't having her stand up in front of the class and reading because that was just embarrassing her, which was for one of the first recommendations is you got to stop that, which they did.
Well, that's good.
But
Yeah.
but they got students
They
to
were-
read to her. They got TAs to read to her and give her and help her with the answers.
So you were
and
never
her,
reading yourself.
and her report card showed that.
or I was listening to an audio book.
Yeah, and then they
yeah.
introduced auto books after,
Oh,
which
okay.
which are all fine. I mean, but they don't help. They don't help the student
Later.
learn anything. It's somebody else, whether it's an auto book or myself or somebody else reading to her. If I read her a book and for a book report, say, and then I read it to her, point out all of the characters, and when she's struggling, give her who the main character is, who the secondary character is, and give her an 80, say, in a book report. Well, that doesn't help her one bit, because somebody else read it to her. She didn't read the book. Somebody else told her who the main character was. Somebody else told her who the secondary characters were. So, and she, oh yeah, and she gives you verbally gives you the answer, and you mark that and say, well, she got an 80. She didn't get a true 80. She didn't really learn anything, which is what the school was doing.
Was saying.
And
it's
I had to
hard-
fight that, to get that with this report and help her with that, which didn't turn out to be the case in her case.
And again, it is one of the things we recommend in schools, that you get a scribe, that you use audiobooks. But I think it is really important to note that you're not always sure, is that person just reading the information to you? Are they giving you information? And yes, you can have a scribe in school, but what do you do when you're out of school, when you're working, when you finish university? You can't kind of bring that scribe with you. When you graduated, did you feel like you had a good education? Were your marks good?
Well, I think, I felt like when I graduated, I was just, honestly, I was surprised because, most of my life I was, not participating in class. I was sitting there doing nothing. I wasn't learning anything. I wasn't able to read and write like the other kids. So I was just happy that I was even graduating. I felt overwhelmed with joy that that I was that I was graduating, and that I was not going to be held back, and I wasn't gonna say you failed at life or at this or whatever. So I was very happy, but I didn't feel like I was fully prepared because I was still struggling with reading and spelling and writing. I couldn't do it by myself. I still felt like I needed to learn more, but I didn't know how, and I knew that I was still going here to KC, so I felt like I was, that hopefully that I was going to get to a level where, I will be able to do this on my own, and, I've gotten to the level where I can read a book by myself without any help, and if it is, it's just the rare word I can't figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and you're not done yet too.
Yeah.
And then from your perspective,
Well, in my perspective, I knew she was struggling from 2005 till 2010-11. We did the Sylvans, still struggling, but then in 13, when I brought her here, had a report done, had her properly diagnosed, and the level of her severity, and brought it to the school board, they assured me they were going to implement, and I saw a really improvement in her grades. So I assumed, because I wasn't there, that I assumed that they were they said they were bringing in TAs. I had no idea that they were just reading and giving her the answers. I assumed they were Barton tutor, because that was one of the recommendations in there, and that they were actually helping her. And with her improvement in grades, I thought it was, because I was still working at the time.
Yeah.
And when she graduated and I saw her final marks, it immediately drew attention to me that something wasn't right here, especially since we went to a job fair after she graduated, because she wanted to get a part-time job in the summer and start making some of her own money, not relying on me. She's a very independent young lady. I'm going to give her the credit.
That's awesome.
And I realized she couldn't read the job applications, she couldn't fill them out properly, and her writing was terrible. So that's when I brought her to, I first went to the Law Society, because I realized at that point I'm going to probably need some legal advice in this, and they found several places, and I went through that, and then the first thing I was advised is you better file a Manitoba human rights thing, because within a year you only have a year from graduating, and it was already 2017. So I did all of that, and then I had her retested here and realized how they had her at 88% in math, 83% in reading, biology, 80 ridiculous marks, giving her level of dyslexia and severity of it. I realized what they had done. They just basically pushed her through school and did that. And so I started filing with the legal aspect of it.
And what agencies, I know we were talking before, what agencies did you win against so far?
Well, the first thing I tried to file against was her disability tax credit, which I won. Then the second one was to get her reinstated, because when she graduated in 2016, June, the fall, they cut her off from CPP, which were giving her about $250 a month. And according to that, if you're going to school, you're entitled to that. But then they ruled that even though she was still attending, had started attending in 2015, coming to KC for over a year before she graduated, because I decided when she didn't seem to be getting as much, I thought the school was getting her some, I would get her an additional class.
That would make sense, right? Like,
and to try and help her.
Yeah.
So she was coming here at my expense and not realizing that the school had done little to nothing. So my first thing was I filed it against the Canadian pension plan, a survivor's benefit for the monthly income that every child is entitled to until they're 25 years of age if they're going to post-secondary school. And I lost that appeal. They said, well, she's not in a school that's recognized. She said, and they gave me a list of recognized schools like Red River, U of M, U of Winnipeg, and some hairdressing facilities are considered, and they will continue that as long as she's in attendance to that. And I argued that, well, she can't attend those. She needs to learn how to read and write in that first, and that KC is the only, that I feel, and if you look up, is the only place in Manitoba and Winnipeg where she was born and lives to help her with those.
Yeah.
And I filed, first I tried to go to the Canadian Human Rights, and they said you can't take the Canadian government, you can't file against them. And I said, well, that's great, so they can literally discriminate against somebody with a disability. And I found out through them and through their website that there is a place that's called the Tribunal Security Council of Canada that can oversee these. And I filed with them, and they accepted. I filled out the report, and they talked to them, and then they said, so basically I said I'm filing on the basis of discrimination of her disability. And then I had to file and change and find out, and I found the code.
Yes.
It was 66-1 and 42A. I have those in my head now.
And those are
of what I filed against them based on her discrimination, and they actually were willing to hear the case. And then when they brought that case up with Canada Pension agreed and back paid her for 2 years, and we've now moved forward, and they're recognizing in her case that KC is a post-secondary education for her, because she is 20 years old now, turning 21, and that she is in attendance full-time based on her disability. So we won that case. That was
was that recognized? So the Manitoba Human Rights Commission, CPP, and the CRA have all recognized that Casey
Yes,
is what
they have now recognized that Casey, in her case, is considered a post-secondary education for her based on her disability.
Okay.
So, which is a big step and a big win for
Yes.
future dyslexic students or anybody with any type of a learning disability
Yes.
can go to a certain that
Get the appropriate
that's
intervention.
appropriate for
Yeah.
their disability
Disability.
and their level of education,
And just
and,
like
and help them with that.
and sorry to interrupt again, like just a reminder too, like dyslexia is a medical diagnosis. So there is a code for it in the DSM, which is what psychologists use and psychiatrists use, and there's a code for it even for within billing for GPs. So it is a medical diagnosis. A lot of times we find people kind of approach it as an educational issue, which it is, right? It is that too, but it's an educational issue because of a medical issue, which I think is really important when parents are fighting for these rights, to remember that you can appeal. This is not something that is ever going to go away. There's not a cure for dyslexia. What would you advise other parents? Like, what would be your advice to them? Other parents who are struggling to get funding, struggling to get this type of education, Orton Gillingham multisensory techniques, recognized for their children?
Well, the best advice I can give them is don't give up, because surely they'll apply and they'll think they've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, and they'll get no, that's not accepted as post-secondary, and they'll have to appeal. But don't give up. Don't think that because the government has said no, we're not recognizing that it's over with. And I went to their website, and this part here where it says, and if you read it, for the purpose of the paragraph and the definition, dependent child falls under section 66(1) and 42A of the Act of the Canadian Pension Plan, or the Canadian government, that full-time attendance at a school or university means full-time attendance at a school, college, or university. But if you look further into that and print it off like I did here, it says, or other educational institution that provides training or instruction of an educational nature of a dependent child shall deem to be, or that they are deemed to be and have been in full-time attendance. So when you look at that, to me that meant that, oh, there is hope here, because they are recognizing of an other educational institution, and I argue that KC Dyslexic Learning Center falls under that, and that they are the only institution that provides the Barton system. I don't know the whole name of it like you do, but and qualified, and I wrote those letters, and I actually won on that basis.
Yeah. And I think it's
To
important
the Tribunal Security Council agreed with me that they are discriminating against a child with a severe learning disability or dyslexia.
And within that too, I think it's important to note that coming here twice a week for the 50-minute lessons was considered full-time.
Yes.
Because when you are dyslexic, that is full-time. That is a lot. So I think that's really important too, that you weren't coming here 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Like university or Red River, or coming, and that was important too, because your retention, your ability to retain information is affected with dyslexia or a learning disability like hers. If you put too much on, if she were to come here 2 or 3 times a week, she'd shut down.
Yeah.
Her brain just wouldn't be able to handle all of that information.
I'd be exhausted.
Yes. Like we were talking about before, right? You're putting so much into it.
Yeah.
You have and we always want people to have a balance. We want people to have a balance in their lives. I mean, that's why we find like the 2 times a week is good.
So that again was part of the argument, that the 2 hours a week based on her ability to retain information and understand it and hold that and use it is considered full-time, and that KC Dyslexic Center, being the only facility in our province, in our city, that's able to provide the proper education, because the school board did nothing. But by reading to her doesn't give her
Yeah.
the ability to learn on her own to read and write. This place does give her that ability. And I've had her retested. She's improved well over a grade or two in each of her levels, plus her comprehension level has gone from when she first started at a grade 2 up to almost a grade 6. So that's a big step in,
That's like
in
so
less than a
much
year and a
harder.
half since graduating, which also I believe helped the
But
powers
that,
that be that oversaw this, the tribunal security, and when it was pressured into the Canada pension plan, to realize
Yeah.
that she is improving,
Yeah.
and
I
that
find-
this place is helping her. And that's to me the ultimate goal in all of this, is that it's not like she's here, like in school it was a waste of time. They weren't giving her the
appropriate
proper thing.
intervention,
Here they
yeah.
are, and she's improved, not dramatically, but she's understanding. She herself has told you how much this
Yeah.
place has meant to her, and at first it didn't seem like it. She was at low level books, but now she's realizing how much it's helped her, and I've realized that too.
It's that old saying, right? Like you have to crawl before you can walk, and you have to walk before you can run, and it's just hard when
Yes,
you're but out in the world and you have to go back to crawling for a while.
and to the parents out there, you're going to find when you're dealing with the government, when you're dealing with the school board, you're going to take 2 steps or a step forward, and they're going to push you 2 back.
Yeah.
And then you have to make up those 2 to get that step forward, and that's where it's been for me. I actually retired a little early because of all of the appeals and everything to help her, and I've been retired since 2013, and it's now 19, and in that entire 6-year period, all I've been doing is battling
That is awesome.
the government,
I'm so happy that you're doing that.
the province, the school board, and I'll continue to do that until she gets her rights. And I'm hoping afterwards to be able to help other kids. I wish I was in a position to do that. But my first priority, though, has to be her,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
getting her what she needs.
Yeah.
But to
But
help,
opening that door is so awesome.
yeah,
What you've done for other
exactly,
parents.
opening
Yeah.
that door, and don't accept that they're saying, well, this isn't a post-secondary education. For the average person, it wouldn't be. This would
Yeah.
be just tutoring and helping them get, like any tutoring would be. Like if you take computer training to become a computer programmer, it's not considered a post-secondary education. But when you can't read or write and you have to come to a place like this, it should be.
Yes. Yeah. I
And
totally
if
agree.
if we have to change the Constitution of Canada to get that in writing for kids of a disability, it should be done.
Mhm.
They are reluctant to want to do that, but that doesn't mean that if you pressure them
Keep going.
and bring that constitutional issue up, that they won't
Reconsider.
Yes.
they won't consider on your child or your situation if you have the proper
Yeah.
documentation, the psychological reports, the KC reports, all of those things. You will win against them and help your child.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for doing take 2.